Hi, I'm Wab Canoe. I'm Anishinaabe from the Ojibways of Enigaming First Nation in Ontario. Welcome to Eighth Fire. The name of this series comes from an Aboriginal prophecy that says that now is the time for your people and my people to come together and build a new fire of peace and friendship. But let's face it, one of the biggest issues that stands between us is land. It used to be all ours, and now, not so much. But you know what? I'm not mad. In fact, in this episode, you're going to meet a whole lot of people who are thinking creatively and working hard to come up with solutions to the toughest problems that keep your people and my people from getting along.
This is my land. This is my homeland. It's Indigenous land.
The pride of having your own territory is huge.
You're blocking the road.
Our culture is based on life on the land.
I'm sorry, Ted. Your line can be.
I see my territory as a place of survival of who we are, a place of survival of our culture and language.
Most of this desert back here, this 1,000 acres, we could make millions off of it, easily. But we're just going to leave it the way it is. We'll take a chunk of our land, do some good economic development to look after everything else, and leave the rest of the land the way it is.
This land is your land. This land is my land. Or as my people say, Kina window weki, Kina window weki, Kina window weki, Kina windamin. This country is big. Space enough for everyone. Why then is land at the heart of every battle between Aboriginals and non-Aboriginals? Just down the river from here, there's a swath of land that cuts through Ontario's heartland, full of cities, farm, and industry. But every kid on the Six Nations Reserve knows it as the Haldimand Proclamation. 950,000 acres given to their ancestors for helping the British win the war against the Americans. But as my mom told me, never mess with the Mohawk. They're still stubbornly fighting to get fair compensation for that deal. It's all part of an equation that's uncomfortable to calculate. Canada's land gains have been the losses of the First Peoples. But, hard as it seems, there are ways of working it out.
The best relationships between Native people and non-Native people are business relationships. That's the best, because it's based on work, it's based on production, it's based on sharing. We have more band-owned businesses on our per capita basis than any First Nation in Canada or tribe in the U.S., and that's what I'm really proud of, is the fact that most of our people work for a living.
The Osoyoos call this valley home. It's the Okanagan in British Columbia, now a magnet for tourists, drawn by the scenery, the Gulf, and the grapes. On the 320 square kilometers that make up their reserve, the Osoyoos have reached out to those tourists. They've developed a vineyard, a golf course, and a 5-star hotel complex on their land. The result, a mini economic boom.
We've been able to create jobs, decent paying jobs, and we have to create more.
Enkamip Cellars is one of the band's biggest success stories. The vineyard is a partnership between the Osoyoos and Vincor Canada, the country's biggest wine producer.
So I thought it'd be a good chance to taste this wine against
Several young people from the reserve work here.
Another year in that barrel will be awesome.
I needed a job in the winter time, and I went to our chief, spoke with him, and he said, give it a try. It's a good opportunity. And I came here, and I knew immediately that winemaking was for me.
Good fruit characters, good integration.
Really mouth-filling with regard to the tannin contribution. Really integrated aromatically.
Very, very good tannins.
I agree.
I would love to be the winemaker here, and Randy's been teaching me the skills, and looking forward to the future of having an Osoyoos Indian Band member running the winery.
You know, the band is, they understand what it takes to survive in the 21st century from an economic standpoint, and they're very forward in their thinking. They understand where they have limitations, and that's one of the reasons why I think this winery is a joint venture.
So this is the reserve on the right-hand side. It cuts across the highway here.
Clarence Louis and his band are proud of what they've achieved, especially given where they started.
Even though we got what I would say a decent reserve, we still lost our best lands. And we lost over 4,000 acres of our best land. Land claims is a big issue with every First Nation, and there's a lot of historical grievances that still have to be looked after. And if it wasn't for us losing our best land, we probably wouldn't have grown up in poverty.
There is no political will to deal with Aboriginal land claims, as it is not popular and it is costly.
Let's get one thing straight. The First Peoples of Canada have never been conquered. We negotiated in good faith and thought that the Crown was doing the same thing. But they had a different approach. Case in point, the Toronto Purchase. The British negotiators were tough and experienced. In 1805, they sealed a deal with the Mississaugas for 250,000 acres along the shores of Lake Ontario. That's the land on which Toronto now sits. The price paid? 10 shillings. That's only 60 bucks in today's money. Here in the Big Smoke, that's not even enough for a night on the town.
I'm sure the James Bay Cree, because of their land claim and because forcing the Quebec government and the federal government to the table, and now that they got $1 billion land claim, they've developed relationships that they would never have developed before. They're hanging around people in government and in business that they would never have hung around with before.
Clarence Louis is talking about the James Bay Agreement and Northern Quebec. This was a David and Goliath confrontation, and the Crees of James Bay stunned a modern-day giant.
They do not want the James Bay project.
The government was forced to recognize the right of Native people not just to their land, but to the development of their land.
La Convention de la baie James, il faut se souvenir, n'est pas arrivée comme ça, de nulle part. Et c'est surtout pas par générosité des gouvernements qu'on a la Convention de la baie James aujourd'hui. On a dû se battre sur le plan politique, sur la place publique. On a dû se battre au niveau juridique.
The agreement signed in 1975 wasn't just a Canadian first. It was a world first. It covers 1 million square kilometers in northern Quebec. That's almost 2/3 of the province. The Crees gave up part of their ancestral lands to the Quebec government to allow the construction of hydro dams. What they got in return was jobs, the control of their schools and health services, and money, $169 million. With that bankroll, they went into business for themselves.
When you look at other Aboriginal people, even around the world, you know, I think the Cree Nation has developed to a point that we can really say that we are a great nation. We have an airline. We have a construction company that's among the 4th largest construction companies in Quebec. We have all kinds of things.
C'est ça qui a permis aux Cree de devenir et d'être la force politique qu'elles sont aujourd'hui. Sans la Convention de la baie James, on n'aurait pas pu arriver là. C'est un document de coexistence, la Convention de la baie James. on établit les bases, comment on va vivre ensemble pour l'avenir.
We're standing on the east coast of Hudson Bay. We're about the 55th parallel of latitude. North of that, there's no development. There are no dams, there's no roads, any kind of major industry. Today, it's still like it was 50 years ago. Maybe 200 miles from here, you start to see development, you know. There's dams, there's dikes, there's reservoirs, there are hydroelectric installations, there are airports, there's a highway, and further south you go, of course, you know, you get the cities and all that.
About 2 and 3 inch, 3/4.
It took 36 years to implement the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement. We had to go to court. We had to bring Canada to court. We had to bring Quebec to court. You know, that attitude was not changing until they wanted to dam our river here in the late 80s.
In 1989, new tension. The Quebec government announced it was going to divert and dam another river, the Great Whale, or Wapmagoosty.
Quebec, you only have 4 minutes to leave the community. 4 minutes.
The Crees were implacably opposed to sacrificing another river to the gods of electricity.
C'est les dernières grandes rivières naturelles du Québec. Il faut les garder.
Their answer was an international campaign that took them all the way to New York City. Matthew Mukash was a leader in that battle.
On Earth Day, when we arrived at Battery Park, there were 24 major American television crews pointing at the canoe. We were all over the news. We even made the news in Europe, you know. So that was the success of the campaign, and we actually killed a $17 billion contract.
The people here said no thank you to hydro, and they managed to put together a campaign and protected and defended that river. Because I'd seen the success of it, I think because my father's the one that spearheaded all that, it's kind of ingrained in me that I would have to be ready to fight for it for my generation.
The James Bay Agreement dealt with some problems, but not all.
The benefits that we're talking about are the basic rights of every Canadian and Quebec citizen. You're looking at what the Cree people have to give up just to get an education system and a health system and so on. They're almost subpar. The basic rights that we've had to give up rivers and identity and culture and everything else.
Akeso Mukash is with the group's ceremony.
How the heck did we get that other guitar in there?
Our legends and traditional ways are threatened by the arrival of the modern day. What will we then become? We've lost touch with our youth, and the last of our great rivers meets a fatal rendezvous. And the trees that once spoke are silenced once and for all. And the spirits that led us here bear witness to our great fall. How will we define ourselves to our children and our grandchildren?
With Matthew Eiserhoff, he composes and sings songs of land and pride. Cree land, Cree pride. They've watched their nation develop, but they also see the social problems that remain.
I got
Diabetes is still way up. You know, cocaine use is through the roof, and the only thing people have are nicer trucks.
Malgré la Convention de la baie James, les conditions psychosociales des communautés est à peu près la même que partout ailleurs. C'est étonnant, mais c'est la réalité. Le taux de suicide chez les Cris est aussi élevé que chez les Algonquins ou les autres nations autochtones. Le taux de réussite est un des plus bas au Québec. C'est la triste réalité. Je m'explique mal, avec tant de développement dans une nation comme chez les Cris, pourquoi les problèmes psychosociaux persistent.
Imagine always having to fight to speak your own language, to hold on to your culture, to hold on to your very identity. And imagine the searing pain of having you, your parents, your grandparents taken away from your families and plunged into the horrors of residential schools. It leaves deep wounds, and time is needed to heal those wounds. At least with the money, the Crees of James Bay were able to build an infrastructure to protect their community and its identity. So it seems that there's the hope of recovery there. But some communities got far less. The Innu Nation didn't want to give up its rights, so they refused to negotiate with Hydro-Quebec. The result? No money and no rights.
I come from a small town called Schefferville. It's a mining town, that's what it was. And it is still a mining town.
Armand McKenzie's community lives on land within the boundaries of the James Bay Agreement.
When the James Bay project was announced, I was probably 10 or 12 years old. And there were a lot of discussions in the kitchen with my uncle, who was chief back then, and along with my father.
But unlike the Cree, the Innu of Schefferville were frozen out of the agreement. This deep injustice, as they see it, has left a bitter taste in their mouths.
The Innu of Schefferville, Sept-Îles, received no royalties, no money, no special powers, no environmental powers or specific regime or political institutions or self-government. Nothing. We only received the prejudice.
There's more. Their dealings with mining companies have been painful and unequal. And those wounds scar not just their minds, but also the countryside.
All the transnational corporations, companies, shareholders, they made a lot of profit, a lot of money with our natural resources, basically. And they took away all of our wealth, and they produced all kind of material. And when they left the community in the early 80s, the huge mining pits was still there, and they are still there today.
The James Bay example may seem to herald the beginning of a more equal relationship between First Nation people and the government. But the Nisitchweastic Cree Nation in northern Manitoba have another, harsher story to tell. The Nisitchweastic Cree Nation were among the first to sign a historical agreement with the Crown, Treaty Number 5. In 1976, Manitoba Hydro diverts the Churchill River as one of the steps in the construction of a dam. The hunting and fishing land of the Nisitchweastic Cree Nation was flooded, and part of their way of life was destroyed. There was no consultation, no deal, no compensation, nothing. Some may have believed that the James Bay Agreement was a turning point in the relationship between Canada and the Native people, but Manitoba Hydro trampled that belief underfoot.
When the water first came up in '76, and there was a lot of angry people because we were never prepared for that, right? We knew it was coming, but we were never prepared. We didn't realize the extent of damage it would do. as a young person in the 70s, hydro wasn't my favorite issue, right? And I think at the end of the day, when I got elected as leader, I had to change my perspective, right?
Several years later, compensation finally came from the federal government, the province, and Manitoba Hydro. With the money came a promise. The Nissequoia-Sikh Cree Nation would be consulted on any future project. That future is called Wasquatum, a 200-megawatt hydro dam 35 kilometers from the reserve.
Hydro came out and basically said, hey, listen, we'll never be able to repay the damages. So what about this opportunity?
The deal was tempting. But the negotiations were far harder than expected.
We weren't really prepared. And although that we had the negotiation process happen for about 8.5 years, we just weren't prepared for that. They're tough, right? You know, they have the resources, they have all the capacity to do the process. And here we are, you know, like we're just a bunch of reserve kids that thrown into this table, right?
I've devoted my life negotiating with corporate Canada governments, dealing with either. It's always going back to school. It's Aboriginal 101. And it's tiring. You get wary of it. You have to be tough, you have to be healthy, you have to consider the community, and sometimes you negotiate under duress.
Finally, in 2006, the community agreed to a partnership with Manitoba Hydro, but the price tag was enormous. The band must invest $84 million of its own money to buy into a 1/3 share of the project. A lot of money for a reserve of 4,500 people.
Our community, you know, right now are probably 400 homes short, right? How do you deal with the current immediate issues, right? When you're trying to put some money aside for this future project.
There have been slip-ups and ambushes at the negotiation table, but the leaders of the Nissequoia-Sikh Cree Nation think that Wasquatum will breathe new life into the reserve.
This is once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, this Wasquatum project. And so we're going to take it from there. As resilient people, we've had harder times and other things, and this is nothing. It's fun.
You see, our community is still in the third world conditions. And when you have a mine at the back, it shouldn't be like that.
The mine in question is a diamond mine. Its name is Victor, and its owner is De Beers, the biggest diamond company in the world. The mine is in the middle of the ancestral lands of the Cree of Attawapiskat. Their reserve is in northern Ontario, next to James Bay.
Ouais. Ils ont donné le OK, je dirais, là, parce qu'ils pensaient, avec le développement de la mine, surtout la mine de diamants, qu'il y aurait un gros revenu pour la bande, pour toute la communauté ici d'Attawapiskat. Divers projets, d'écoles, de maisons, des routes. Ça s'est pas réalisé de façon-là.
They've been there for thousands of years, and here, one of the largest, if not the largest, diamond companies in the world arrive and develop, and all they get is peanuts from that development. We need to establish a new framework when these situations come about. You know, if De Beers is going to install a diamond mine right next to one of the poorest communities not only in the country but in the world, they should be forced and obliged to do something about it.
We're not responsible for infrastructure and education and building schools and things like that. That's not. In Canada, we've got a fairly stable democracy. We've got good economic performance in general. So there's a government that is tasked to do that.
The Attawapiskat community negotiated with De Beers. The largest diamond consortium in the world sat down with a small band of 2,000 people. In 2005, both sides agreed to an IBA, an Impact Benefits Agreement. Stripped of the legal jargon, the company agreed to pay the native band compensation for the right to mine on their land. In this case, the company said it would pay the band $2 million a year, and that amount would go up if the mine made a profit.
We were 3 years negotiating that IBA, and we did not go forward with full construction until we had the ratification of the community.
It was a big mystery with this IBA, and yeah, a lot of people signed it without the knowledge of really what was in there. So it's not a good package right now.
Our understanding, our belief, is that it's a very fair and generous IBA, and we've seen other communities take a great interest in learning what's in the Attawapiskat IBA as they pursue other mining operations in other parts of Canada.
Well, IBAs are good, okay, if they're acceptable to Aboriginal communities and negotiated freely. I think they're okay, but they only respond to a certain need, a very minimal need that are in the communities.
One deal, two diametrically opposed visions of how it should work. And that disagreement creates friction between the band and the company. Here's an example of the band's frustration.
This is the banner that we're holding. There are provisions in the Impact Benefit Agreement for jobs and giving the first opportunity to Attawapiskat members. But the gap between where people are now and where they need to be is considerable. There's no plan in place on how we're going to get Attawapiskat members from here to there. You know, the people in Attawapiskat are skilled, they know what to do, they're smart. It's just taking those smarts, getting a grade 12 equivalency or level, and then we can move on. But if you don't get that minimum grade, you're stuck.
But how do you convince young people to finish school if there are no schools? The elementary school children of Attawapiskat go to class in prefabs. It's been that way for 10 years, and it's the same on several other reserves.
It's quite a very a safety issue and a health issue, especially in the winter time, when the draft is so harsh that it's really cold inside most days.
I have two communities without schools. How can that be? How can it be that Attawapiskat has no school for their children, Quechua has no school for their children? All across the Northern Territories, children are in unsafe conditions, substandard conditions. Children lose hope in grade 4 and grade 5. It's an international scandal.
Equal education! For education! Equal education!
A few years ago, a group of young people from Attawapiskat decided to fight to get a new school.
My name is Shannon Gustajian. I am from the Attawapiskat First Nation.
They turned to the internet. Canadians rallied to their cause.
3 years ago, my sister, Srina Gustajian, here on this spot, pleaded for a new school for our community. But I ask, why do I have to come back and do the same thing once again? But our own government cannot keep a promise that they have made 3 times.
The face and voice of this fight was that of Shannon Gustajian. For her, it was a fight for justice. But on June 1st, 2010, Shannon was killed in a car accident. Her family and friends decided to carry on her fight.
I just feel so proud to have had a child that had a vision and truly believed in something that she stood for. Our daughters started something unique. She started the first and biggest youth movement, children's rights movement in Canada. And that tells a lot, like how one kid with a dream can move a nation.
So we invite all politicians, First Nation leaders, students, and educators across Canada to make Shannon's dream a reality, because no child should ever have to beg or fight for an education in this country.
Federal MP Charlie Angus became a friend and supporter of Shannon. He continues to fight for her cause.
Shannon is a national symbol. She's a hero of hope for young people. She has touched people in a way that I haven't seen other people being able to do. We need heroes in our communities. We have communities where kids are giving up hope and killing themselves, one after the other. We have to be able to say there's another way, and Shannon, for so many Native and non-Native students, she's become a national symbol of hope.
She was put here for that purpose, to provide that message to the young people to never give up. Because she knew that she had to struggle through school. She struggled in school, but she never gave up.
So I got her some seashells, even these ones from up north. Those ones, she would have loved those.
A part of Shannon's dream will soon become reality. The Department of Aboriginal Affairs has announced that Attawapiskat will get a new primary school in 2013.
Canadians wouldn't believe what these kids live through. They wouldn't believe it. It's not just that they have a school on a toxic site. If you saw their homes, if you saw the living conditions in some of these communities, it is indescribable. This is not Canada. This is not second world. This is not third world. It is a fourth world.
We're landing in Iqaluit very shortly. Please fasten your seatbelt.
We have 3 jet service flights that come up from Ottawa and Montreal a day. We're the 20th busiest airport in the country.
This is a multicultural city. We have people in Iqaluit that come from not only all over from different parts of Nunavut, but also from other parts of the Arctic, other parts of Canada, and other parts of the world.
The first time I got off the plane and I touched the ground here, and I took a breath I just felt home. I said, this is where I want to be.
Stéphane Cloutier is from Quebec. He has lived in Nunavut for 17 years. His wife Gila is Inuk. They have 4 children. He loves his new home, but he hasn't quite picked up all of its traditions.
This is a country food market where people come and sell their meat. And we came here a little too late, I guess. Everything was gone except for caribou head and 2 legs that we got. My husband doesn't hunt, so I have to come here to things like this to get my meat. And I told him before, never find country food too expensive until you can go hunting and get it himself or me.
Nunavut is huge, almost 2 million square kilometers. That's 1/5 of Canada, with just 30,000 people in that immense space. Its capital, Iqaluit, is a boomtown, a young boomtown. In 10 years, its population has doubled, and 60% are under 25. It took the Inuit 25 years of struggle and long, tough negotiations with the federal government to win the right to run this land.
And with this government, they would at last be able to make decisions that have an impact on their lives and not let someone else from south to make those decisions for them.
For the Inuit, April 1st, 1999 was and remains a day of celebration. a day which brought dignitaries and journalists from around the world to witness the birth of the first Inuit constitutional territory. Nunavut changed the map of Canada, both geographically and linguistically. The Aboriginal language, Inuktitut, was for the first time recognized as an official language.
I'm working on teaching my children to speak more Inuktitut. I would like to believe that they'll grow up having learned Inuktitut and to be able to work in Inuktitut.
Nunavut has prizes to offer, natural resources, and many seek them. Mining exploration is big business in this territory. Deposits of gold, of iron, of diamonds, and uranium have all been found. And that's just the start.
L'Arctique est comme le grenier du Canada. Je veux dire, il y a des richesses énormes ici, que ce soit côté minier. Les gens parlent aussi éventuellement qu'il y a toutes sortes d'industries qui peuvent se développer ici. Mais pour développer cette richesse-là, il faut investir dans les gens.
I feel comfortable with Mother Nature. It's so peaceful. After hard days of work in the office, when you get to go out in the tundra like this and see the landscape and fresh air.
We really need the mining sector to help out in this region. Most of what we have is people relying on the government, Nunavut government, and you really can't rely on the government itself. You need to have the private sector help out.
Anything else? There's more.
You have to take into consideration in the long term, we need to get jobs for our younger generations. We just can't rely on wildlife to survive.
In tough negotiations with Ottawa, the Inuit agreed to limit their control to 18% of the territory. That means the federal government has the final word on 82% of the land. In comparison, the provinces control all of their land.
I think what is important to keep in mind with the development of natural resources is to ensure that decisions that are made about development are not made somewhere else outside of the territory, but that the people, to ensure the people of Nunavut are involved in that development, that they participate in the decision making.
You know, when it comes to sovereignty and the land of the Inuit, we are sovereignty. We live here for millennia, and this is our home, and it will always be our home. So whatever happens to our land and our environment, we need to have that control and recognition as well, and we should always strive for that.
Development is the dream for Aboriginal people, but reality is the Indian Act. Most First Nations are subject to it, which means they live on land held in reserve for them by the Crown. That applies to the Attawapiskat, to the Nisitchewayasik Cree Nation, and to the Yisoyus Band. Whatever their will, whatever they plan, the Indian Act stands in the way.
Most of the Indian Act is about land. It's about reserve land, or as they call it, federal land. We don't call it reserve federal land. We call it our land. But yet we have to go to the department anytime we want to do land development, and we have to basically ask them permission on what we can or can't do with our land.
How do you make a bad situation better? For some, the answer is simple: abolish the Indian Act. For others, the priority is to rethink the approach to property in these lands. A leader of that group is Manny Jules.
There are institutions that governments have created to facilitate good marketable lands. You have none of that on Indian reserves. You have a situation where somebody else can make the decision on your behalf because they're the trustee, and that has to change. And the only way it can change is by transferring the ownership of those lands to the First Nation.
To me, money equals opportunity. So that's why I love spending my time with business people like yourselves. We have business partners that work with us on developing a hotel or developing a business on the reserve. They're just amazed that we don't have control of our own lands. To teach winemaking, to teach horticulture, we're able to manage our own lands. We should be deciding what's best for us. I think whether it's Osuyus, or Squamish, or Member 2, or Tutsina, or there's so many other bands across this country that are proven that they know what's best for their people.
What Aboriginal people want is the right to develop our communities according to our dreams and our aspirations. It's as simple as that.
My dream for Ottawa Wabasket is to have better homes and better future for the youth. And we need to use the land, because if we don't use the land, we're going to lose it.
This is the way I like to see my grandchildren, is to be able to go out there and tell the world about our people, the land, and then come back here and be on the land, you know, that is untouched. Well, that's how I like to see my grandchildren grow up, is to be masters of both worlds, so to speak.
Aboriginal Canadians want to be part of this society based on fundamental values: equality, justice, and respect for our status as Aboriginal group in this country, because we were here on this land. We won't move anywhere else. This is our land. This is our homeland.